Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Amy Pollack, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm so excited for our time together.
Thank you, Mike.
Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about these books that you're writing, and how excited we are about them. Okay?
Great.
Well, thanks for being here. So where were you born?
Okay, so I was born in Morristown, New Jersey.
Yeah.
In 1953, and January. And let's see, from the earliest age, I always loved reading and writing.
Yeah.
And then how I started my Jelly Bean stories was when I was in 4th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was age 9, my teacher would call me to the front of the room to tell these stories about a mischievous little girl named Jelly Bean. I would tell these stories off the top of my head, and all my classmates seemed to love them. So I went up periodically, usually, before a holiday or when there was downtime. And I didn't really start writing them down a little while later.
Yeah.
And then, I was in school, then I was in college, then I was in graduate school, then I was teaching, then I got married and had children, and then helping out with, so I had my own 3 kids, and I helped out with my parents when they were sick and dying, and my mother-in-law similarly. And she had always encouraged me to continue with my writing because I give a lot of presentations, and I always say in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades, that's who those grades are who my stories are best for.
Right.
And when the students ask me my writing process and this and that along those lines, I say I procrastinated a lot. And does anyone know what that means? And they all seem to, and they get accused of that by their parents. And I said, so don't do that. But as I said, my mother-in-law always encouraged me, which was interesting because she was a really critical person. So she would criticize me about a lot else. May she rest in peace. And we actually ended up having a nice relationship, but she would always say to me, and other people would as well, whatever happened to your children's books? And I'd say, I don't know. I just had never completed them. Obviously, it took me 60 years, so that was a long time coming. And so finally I did, and COVID, the pandemic, was actually my silver lining because you couldn't go anywhere. So I was stuck home, and even though my kids said to me, what, you can't come here to babysit? And it's not permissible right now, especially for older folks.
Right.
So I could either finish my book and send it around various places, or clean out my closets, and that wasn't quite as exciting. So I was sort of forced to sit there and send them around. And happily, after about, 20 rejections or so, a publisher accepted them, and my first 2 books, and they're The Adventures of Jelly Bean and The Further Adventures of Jelly Bean. I don't know if that's showing too well.
Yep, I see it. Yeah.
Okay. And my new publisher, who I switched to, has my book 3, and happily, I just finally did get my edits. So that's a whole process. So that I'm in the midst of working on, in between babysitting for my 7 grandchildren, and I do PR, such as this one.
Hmm.
So, and including going to LA because someone said they were interested in possibly turning my stories into a TV series, which would be wonderful. And nothing's
Wow.
happened with that yet. And I'm writing my book 4, and I'll continue because everyone seems to love a series,
Yeah.
as I always did as a kid. I was always a big reader, and that was that.
Yeah, but anything you can do to get books in the hands of our youth, we need to do, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's incredibly important.
Yes.
That's exciting about the television thing. That's really cool. That'll
Nothing
be
happened
exciting.
yet, but we'll see.
So
Keep
so you have another book coming out. When is the third one going to be available?
Oh boy, oh boy. So I have to get my edit. So it's a process back to them, and hopefully it won't take me overly long.
Hmm.
So hopefully in 2 or 3 months, with
Okay.
any luck.
Well, we'd love to have you back if you'd like to come back and promote that one. And
Of course.
we can talk about the book in detail if you'd like.
Oh, that'd be
So
great.
so let's go back for just a second, if it's okay, with your
Of
permission.
course.
Did you grow up in Marsdale?
Oh, Morristown. Well,
Morristown, sorry. Did you grow up
that's
in Morristown?
funny. Okay, so I grew up near there in
Okay.
a town called Summit, New Jersey, if you're
Okay.
familiar with New Jersey.
I'm
That,
not, but that's okay. I've heard
okay.
of Summit, believe it or not.
Oh, really? It's
Yeah.
a nice little town, really
Yeah.
is. Very nice. And then we moved to Short Hills, which is a town next door to it. And I raised my kids we moved to Livingston, which is
Yeah.
another town right nearby.
Yeah.
And I guess you could say I'm a Jersey girl.
Yes, you
And
can.
yeah. So my mother always called herself, although my dad was from New York. And now we recently moved to Florham Park.
Oh, there you go.
Mhm.
So growing up in New Jersey, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
Well, I was so lucky, Mike. And come to realize how unusual it is. I was
Yeah.
telling my little granddaughter about this, who we babysat for this weekend. So I had this idyllic childhood, and my parents were wonderful, not perfect, but they were very, very caring. And my dad always took me to the library and always encouraged me to read. And I'm from a family of writers, and we all kind of love to write, and we played out on the street. And like you say, aside from reading and writing and going to visit relatives and being with our grandparents and so forth, we played um I want to say ping pong, that's not what I mean. Jump rope, and we played kickball, we played spud, we played a tag rather,
Hmm.
and all kinds of things like that. So we rode our bikes, and we stayed out on when weather permitting.
Hmm.
And when we were inside, we played Monopoly and all kinds of things before all technology has taken over. But that
Yeah.
wasn't the case with us.
Yeah. Zero
I was
screen time,
lucky.
right? You know, growing up.
Sorry?
Zero screen time growing up.
No, exactly. Yeah, we played out on the street, and that was some of our fondest memories. We hated having to come in,
Yep.
until we were
Yep.
called for dinner. And
I remember that.
yeah, oh, you do?
Yeah,
You
I
also?
do. Yeah, that's how I grew up too.
Oh,
So
nice.
so who was the most influential person to you growing up?
I have to say my dad,
Hmm.
because I guess we had so many similar interests, and which he had cultivated in me. And I was very close with his mom, who was widowed very young. So she took me to travel all over Europe
Hmm.
and Israel, and when I was 12. But younger than that, my dad, he read first to me the Bible, then all the Greek myths, then all of Dickens, which is pretty unusual. Like
Hmm.
when I mention that to people, they're like, oh, wow. So I read all of Dickens between the ages of 9 and 16,
Hmm.
and we just always had a lot of fun together. He took us skating outdoors in the wintertime. We jumped in the leaves in the summer. He took us swimming, and I mean me, my sister and brother.
Hmm.
In the summer, we just did a lot and had a lot of fun together. I was
That's
lucky.
awesome.
But then he
That-
died young, but that was,
oh, I'm
I
sorry.
know. I was 35.
Yeah,
He was 60. So
that is
yeah,
still young.
I
That's still
know.
young.
True, true, true.
So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Oh, English.
Yeah.
Since I always did very well in it. And, as I said, I loved reading and writing, and I helped my own and I taught it among other subjects later in life. And I just really, really enjoyed that the most. I wasn't very good in math or science, and of course I ended up teaching those also, which is another kind of
Kind of
interesting
ironic.
story.
Kind of ironic, huh?
Yes, totally. I remember, I'm not kidding. This one
Yeah.
time I got hired, I guess they were pretty desperate. Someone had left,
Yeah.
and the principal goes, "So are you okay with the science?" I'm like, "Sure." And another one and I was pretty bad in it in school, but I just loved it. We
Yeah.
did a lot of fun creative things. Like I
Yeah.
did Teacher for a Day, and I recreate a lot of these in my books.
Hmm.
And one time I got hired, I think someone had just quit, and I guess they were pretty desperate because that principal said to me, "Are you okay with the physics?" Sure. I had never taken physics, and I had
Wow.
failed chemistry.
Wow.
So what was I thinking? But
Yeah.
my kids and my husband got me through it, and I was a baby step ahead of the kids. So
I got you. So what is it they say? If you want to master a subject, teach it.
that's funny because I haven't heard that truism, but yes, I would totally concur.
Yeah. So I owned a Keller Williams office, a real estate office, a
Uh-huh.
franchise for 18
Right.
years. And one of the things we would do is if we had an agent that had a tough time with lead generation or had a tough time with consultation or had a tough time with whatever, right? I would sit down with them and I would encourage them to teach it.
Interesting.
And they would teach it and then they'd walk out of there with this whole new set of skills,
Yes.
this whole new set of confidence, this whole just like they were just overwhelmingly happy about whatever that subject was that they were struggling with because
Interesting.
now they had taught it.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Isn't that crazy?
Like, yeah, because you have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to be scared to death of getting questions.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of was anyway, but you're in a better position.
Well, and
Right.
you have to think on your feet. It's kind of like baptism by fire, right?
Really.
You gotta get in there and throw yourself into it. So
Exactly.
yeah.
I remember the night before thinking, what was I thinking?
Right.
Like, and the first day, oh, I also taught math
Yeah.
to mostly special ed kids, not totally. And I remember getting in there the first day, my supervisor said, "Okay, I'm going to assign you fifth grade geometry and sixth grade geometry." Well, geometry I had been terrible in. And the
Mhm.
first day, talk about baptism by fire.
Yeah.
She said, "All right, you know what? Just go around, make sure I don't think they have this anymore.
Mhm.
Make sure they're using their protractors correctly." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I'm
Sure.
looking around, and I noticed a girl who seemed to know what she was doing, so I
Mhm.
sort of mimicked that. Interesting.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right?
Well, that is true. Oh, yes, I know. I say that to my kids when they're like, "Oh, so and so is copying me." I'm
Right.
like, "That's a compliment."
Yeah. It's
That's funny.
resourcefulness, right?
Yes, yes, for sure.
I love it. So in high school, did you have a favorite teacher?
Oh gosh. Let me think who stands out. So I was sent to a private school for high
Mhm.
school, and I did have a lot of very good teachers, and I'm picturing them, and they were no nonsense.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't get away with much, and their assignments were hard.
Mhm.
And a lot of people did want to copy my homework. Well, at least for English and Latin
Mhm.
languages. It wouldn't make any sense for anyone to have copied my math homework.
Right.
And yeah,
Especially geometry, right?
as you could, oh, good Lord. So much. And I remember my mom saying, that was my best subject. And I'd be like, oh God, really? And back then, it's so different now, but then we didn't have tutors. If
Yeah.
you failed something, you failed.
Yeah.
That was it.
You had to take it again.
And then things changed. I mean, I know now where needed, which is a good thing. As
Yeah.
long as someone isn't doing your work for you, it's good to have some extra help.
I
I
agree with
totally
that.
believe in that.
So you graduate from high school and you go away to college. Where do
Hmm.
you go to college?
So I got into my sixth choice, which I tell kids and my students, because I went to Goucher
Okay.
College and I didn't get into my top 5 choices, as I've just said. And it's a really good life lesson because I went with a terrible attitude
Oh no.
and I loved it from the first second I was there. I really
Wow.
did, which is
That's
just
great.
shows that you can make anything out of anything if
Hmm.
you switch up your attitude and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just really liked it very much. I can't say I did that well because I was kind of busy having a good time.
Hmm.
And then I sort of pulled it together later on, but not at the beginning.
Yeah. So
And then
is
I
it,
went to graduate school after that.
so have you found it true that no matter what the situation is, if you look hard enough, you can see a positive side to it?
Totally. You only have to read, because I've read pretty widely and my tastes are eclectic,
Mhm.
and you learn just so much from different people's experiences,
Yeah,
good, bad, and indifferent.
it's true.
So, if you read Viktor Frankl's books, he
Hmm.
made it through the Holocaust
Yeah.
and he wrote books. I could barely believe it on the meaning of life.
Hmm.
And for someone to have been up against what he was and survived all what he made it through
Hmm.
and come out with this attitude, you're so right. It's the only way you could explain it. I mean, other people, of course, crumbled under those circumstances, naturally, but you're right. And my both my grandmothers were that way.
Yeah.
They had to make it through the depression, and you had to be resilient,
Hmm.
and there was no point just sitting down and not trying your hardest. I mean, I remember hearing, my uncle had written up his autobiography, which was pretty fascinating because his family had escaped from Russia,
Hmm.
and one line in it, and she never spoke about this, or my grandparents were not complainers, and it was my grandmother for years when they came to this country supported their parents and him. And I was like, wow, it was almost unheard of.
Hmm.
Or it would be much more unusual these days.
Yeah.
She did. She had a business. She got married late. And yeah, that part was so interesting. But you're right about that,
Yeah.
about your things being attitudinal. So true.
So I interviewed a lady who's a therapist in New York,
Uh-huh.
and to this day, and we were talking about her life story, which is what we
Hmm.
do on this podcast, right?
Right.
And she had two grandmothers on either side, maternal
Right.
and paternal, right?
Hmm.
That both had survived the Holocaust.
Uh,
And one of the things that she noted about her two grandmothers was they fed everybody in the neighborhood.
wow.
So when they would cook family dinners, they would make more than everybody could
Mhm.
possibly eat on purpose.
Huh.
Then they would take portions of that meal, package it up in like Tupperware type stuff, right? And
Mhm.
they would take it around to the neighbors. The grandmothers would take it around to the neighbors and deliver it to them.
Wow.
What's interesting about that is both of the grandmothers in the Holocaust nearly starved to death.
Wow.
Okay.
They understood about hunger.
Food was love for them,
Yeah. Oh God, of
right?
course.
So I pointed that out to her and she started crying.
Mm.
But if you think about it, that was their love language. That was their way of loving all the people around them
Mm.
and loving their life. Does that make sense?
So, yes,
Yeah.
so interesting
Just
because
amazing.
Totally. My one grandfather, and I wish I had known him, but he died in 1929.
Yeah.
He had come here having, well, this happened to Jewish people in Russia,
Yeah.
having seen his parents both killed in front of him.
Mm.
And, then they would take you. I don't know how things are so different now, but I won't get into politics or anything. But they would grab you, a young, especially a teenage boy, he was a teenager, and force you to go into the army.
Mhm.
So he ran away and he was tossed into jail, and he had to kill the jailer so he could get out.
Mm.
He took his gun when the jailer was asleep, made it to this country. I wish I could have known or asked more about that.
Right.
As I said, he died in 1929.
Yeah.
And came here not knowing the language, penniless, not knowing anybody.
Mhm.
And he worked his way up. I mean, worked hard for someone who owned a sweater factory,
Mhm.
and people needed sweaters in World War I.
Mhm.
So that did well. And he didn't put his money in the stock market. He put it into land. And
Oh.
thankfully, I mean, it was sad because he died when my father was 1.5,
Mhm.
and my grandmother was pregnant with her second son.
Mhm.
And he was kind of older by that point because he had been married to someone previously.
Mhm.
And this just was never talked about, but he had been divorced from his first wife.
Mm.
And that was a big to-do.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.